Next, from Auburn, Illinois, we go one-on-one with Gary Niemeyer, chairman of the National Corn Growers Association. We hear how the continuing drought in the Midwest may soon stop barge traffic on the Mississippi south of St. Louis, and we hear how that could cause a $7 billion impact to Illinois businesses and consumers. This runs about 20 minutes.
Gary Niemeyer, chairman of the National Corn Growers Association. Thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Thank you very much, Terry. I'm happy to be here.
We recently had some of the Illinois congressional delegation join in signing on a letter asking the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to take actions right away on some obstructions around the Mississippi River that are apparently the result of low water conditions. People will remember the drought over the summer, and those conditions continue to have an impact on the ability of barges to go up and down the river. Your organization was one of those who are encouraging action to be taken. So if you would, let's start with an overview for those who haven't followed this issue. What is the issue and what's at stake?
Well, like you said, Terry, last year we had a major drought, which is continuing. And one of the things that we try to do is move our products on the water system because it's the most efficient way of moving our products. However, with this drought, it has created a problem. The Mississippi River, in and of itself, is one means of moving most of our traffic, but a little known fact is the Missouri River, which comes into the Mississippi just north of Alton, Illinois, produces about 60 to 70% of the water flow from St. Louis to Cairo. At Cairo, the Ohio converges with the Mississippi, and there are no locks from St. Louis all the way down to New Orleans.
And so the action that the Corps would take is to do what relative to the river?
Well, there's two problems. Number one is the problem of the supply of water coming from the Missouri River. There are 5 different reservoirs in North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, that are, they take the water out at a certain level to maintain, there's a master manual for the Mississippi River, to maintain a certain flow, a 9-foot channel. And because of the concerns of water curtailment in that area of that part of the Missouri River, they have dropped, usually they drop from 37 million cubic foot per second down to, they normally drop to 20, but this year, to save water, they're only dropping to 12,000 cubic foot per second, which that is what controls the water level, really, from St. Louis to Cairo. Added to that,
and if I understand, we had a little bit prior conversation, yeah. I know it's easy for people to look at this, so I just want to keep it simple. So we have these dams upstream, these water reservoirs,
exactly,
on the Missouri River, and when water is released during the winter months, as we are now, at the normal level, which would be about 20,000
cubic feet
per second. The fact that they've cut it down now to 12 because they're still having a drought conditions, exactly. They're trying to husband or save their water. It's dropped the Mississippi River's level by how much?
A substantial amount. Essentially, every 6,000 cubic foot per second of water released from those dams amounts to about a foot depth of water in the Mississippi River. That's part of the problem. The second part of the problem is called rock pinnacles, and they stick up from the bottom. They're found along the Thebes, Illinois, and Camp Point, Illinois. That's somewhere between, if you were drawing a parallel map, Carbondale down to Cape Girardeau, Missouri. But they're in the middle of the river, and these rock formations, as the water level goes down, will obviously curtail shipment of grain because it gets into the paddle or the wheels on the paddles on the barges, propellers on the bottom of the boat, and scrapes the barge loads.
So we got the river coming down, the rocks are there. Normally the rocks are not a problem, but now with the low water conditions, as I understand it, we're on the verge of what, halting barge traffic on the river?
There's talk about stopping barge traffic from December 10th through probably sometime in the 1st of March. Now, in that time frame, we normally ship about $2.3 billion worth of agricultural products, of grain, but we also ship up a lot of other products such as coal, fertilizer, rock salt for Chicago, just fuel, and altogether, that time frame, shutting down the river on that stretch of the river, would amount to a $7 billion economic curtailment of moving product.
And so let me just interject because I want people, it's easy for people to think in their mind, this is on a river south of St. Louis, I live in Chicago, it doesn't impact me. The fact is, it's going to impact people across the state of Illinois, right?
It's going to impact, yes, absolutely. And really and truly, in the state of Illinois, half of our agriculture products are exported via the Illinois, Mississippi, or the Ohio rivers. So it's really going to impact the state of Illinois more so than others. And your original question was, we've had some congressionals sign on, and we are very thankful. There were 14 congressmen, both of our senators, and our governor, Pat Quinn, has signed on to this letter, as well as multiple other congressmen. There's 62 altogether, plus Jay Nixon, who happens to be the governor of Missouri, and a lot of senators, both senators from Iowa. There is a large concern about the economic downfall that will take place should we not be able to utilize that stretch of the river system to move our grain and our other products.
Yeah, it's really, as we had been discussing a little bit off camera, it's really a national issue. 14 Illinois congressmen signed on, but the total number you just said was what, 64?
62.
62. Of the grain that's moved down the river, and again, agriculture is the biggest industry in Illinois. Many of us don't work directly, and so we may not realize that, but you as the head of the Grain Growers Association and all, how much of the economic activity of growing grain and all is tied to getting that grain on barges down the Mississippi? What percentage of the crop moves that way?
Believe it or not, 60% of all the corn grown in the United States is exported through the Mississippi River through the Gulf of Mexico. 60%. That's a huge amount of grain.
And you're talking billions and billions of dollars in product, right?
Absolutely. Again, just $2.3 billion worth of grain movement and all the other products. But as much as that is important, we need to utilize the river system going the other direction to bring our fertilizer, our dry fertilizer, our nitrogen solutions, our anhydrous ammonia up the river so that we can be ready for next spring's production by having our fertilizer in hand and ready to go.
When do you, as a farmer, when do you put the fertilizer, what's the deadline for the farmers for putting the fertilizer on the fields?
Well, there's two aspects. Right here in Illinois, we do a lot of hours in the fall of the year, but the farther north you get, there's a lot of spring application. And really, it's the nitrogen solutions, such as 28% nitrogen, which most every farmer uses in a means of a starter fertilizer or a means of fertilizing their crop in the springtime. The problem is most of the plants can handle maybe a fourth of all the product they use. So these channels of moving our fertilizer as well as our grain have to stay open and keep moving. It's not just one time fill the plant up and you're ready to go. It's just a continuation. And that's where the problem will come in.
And we, it was my fault. I probably should have focused a little more. So what we're asking the Corps of Engineers to do, we had discussed the water level is down by more than a foot on the Mississippi. We have these rock formations that are threatening the barge traffic because, as we said, the propellers, which would be thousands and thousands of dollars to replace, could be chewed up hitting these rocks. What are we asking the Corps of Engineers to do?
Two things. Number one, we are asking them to remove these rock pinnacles, which amounts to about 850 million metric ton of rock off the bottom of the river in those two specific areas of the Mississippi. And second of all, to open the floodgates and allow more than 12,000 cubic foot per second of water on the Missouri to come down to fill up what is left. You know, the continuation, this drought started and created a problem with our lack of production of grain because we had no control over it. But now this is a continuation of that, and until we start getting rain or snow melt or something of that sort, we're totally dependent upon the Army Corps of Engineers, the Missouri River, ability to open the reservoirs up and make the master manual work, as well as getting rid of the rock pinnacles.
Who decides? Who says do it or don't do it as far as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers? Who's the decision maker, as George Bush would say?
I'm going to be general in this. It is somebody within the Army Corps of Engineers that makes that decision. I'm not really sure of that individual. But we are requesting that the President enforce the 501 section of the Stafford Act, which gives him the ability to request them to open up these reservoirs to make shipment of grain and chemicals and fertilizer and seed and everything else possible.
Now let's just say, for the sake of discussion, that they don't remove these rocks and they don't open up the river. Then barge traffic may come to a grinding halt.
Yeah.
But some people would say, well, you know, why can't we move it through trucks or rail? What would be the alternative means of moving that product?
There are alternatives such as rail and of trucks. But the problem is there's just not enough trucks nor rail to move this volume of product in that short a period of time. And I want to go back to one thing. If they remove the rocks in the water at these 2 points, they can reduce, or they can add 1.5 feet to the amount of draft. The Army Corps of Engineers is supposed to have a 9-foot draft along the whole Mississippi River, and they're supposed to maintain that. But because of this drought, that has reduced the water level. So if we take 1.5 feet of these rocks out, that will maintain that we can, you know, pick up 1.5 feet, but we still are going to need some more water from the reservoirs on the Missouri River to make that happen, to have the 9-foot channel so we can move product. And if it's an 8.5 foot, they have to reduce the amount of barge cargo, which virtually takes all the profit out of moving the product down the river.
So they're already lightening their load so their barges don't sit as deep into the water.
Exactly.
So if we were forced to go to alternative means, the rail, but the trucks, I would imagine, because it would take so many trucks to move the same amount of product that a barge could move, that the cost of the product would probably go up. For fertilizer, for all the various things that we as a society use, would probably go up quite a lot.
Well, it really would. You know, just one 15 barge tow is equal to about 1,050 trailer trucks, or 2.5 unit trains with 6 locomotives. And the problem is, you know, we spend a lot of money on our road system just to keep it operational, and the railroads, they just can't build rail that quick to move anything to keep up to this monumental problem we're coming up on. This is not just something that happens every other year. This is once in a lifetime. I mean, even in 1988, we didn't have these big of problems.
So what would you say if the Corps said, you know, we don't know how long this drought will last. We can't let more water out because we need it upstream for the communities there, for hydroelectric power, etc. I mean, they may make that argument, and it would be true that we don't have another severe drought this summer. What would your position be on that?
Well, this is where there has to be national leadership to take control and make a wise decision that works the best for everybody. Now, they have pre-cut back from 37 down to 20, which is normal, but they're already cutting that 20 down to 12,000 cubic foot per second of water flow.
So they're already holding back.
They're already holding back, and the question is, you know, nobody knows what the weather is going to do, obviously, but we have to continue to grow this country, and to do that, we need to move products. We were very fortunate a year ago to move $137 billion worth of products out of this country, all agriculture products. And believe it or not, 40 billion of that was above and beyond the balance of trade. If we're to get
so you
back,
might say profit.
Profit, exactly. And that money came from foreign sources, that money from outside the United States. 95% of the people in this world that eat food come or live outside of the United States boundaries. So if we're going to continue to grow and deal with the fiscal cliff and deal with the economic problems we're facing, we're going to have to find ways to make everything work so that we can use the appropriate amount of water to move our product and also clean up this rock formation. And it'll probably take a combination of both.
Yeah, you know, many of us who just sit in the offices and we go to the grocery store and we just don't think through these things as you do. But so we move a massive amount of product up and down the Mississippi River. It really is still a highway, as it has been for centuries, down to the port of New Orleans, and then from there out to the rest of the world.
Exactly.
Which is the primary means and just trying to make this as simple as possible. So that the chokehold right now, there's no dams as I understand it,
South of St. Louis.
South of St. Louis. But with these rock formations, you say, are thieves. And so that at the moment is what's threatening.
Yeah.
Once we get south of the end of Illinois, we have the Ohio join into Mississippi. And with that influx of water, then the water level, as I understand it, is sufficient?
Yes, it is. It's been curtailed.
So it's between St. Louis and the end of Illinois down to Cairo where the problem lays.
And again, believe it or not, between 60 and 70% of the water in that stretch of the river, of the Mississippi, comes out of the Missouri River.
Yeah, I found that fascinating. I didn't have any idea that amount of water came from the Missouri. Your letter had said something about by December 10. Why December 10? Why is that a critical date?
Well, the Army Corps of Engineers started November 22nd of reducing the amount of supply of water from the Missouri River. And according to statistical data with the master manual, they figured at that point we would be below the 9-foot channel level, and that's the reason why.
And when you say the master manual, that's a term we're not familiar with.
The Army Corps of Engineers has a master manual. They determine amount of water flow, and they've been very accurate over the years of putting this together, of how much water would be needed from these 5 different reservoirs in the northern part of this country, in Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota, to be released. And it has to do with temperature and a whole bunch of other factors. However, the best thing is if we would start to get some rains, but they don't even seem to be in the forecast, and that was one of the other big concerns of the Army Corps of Engineers, is the continuation of this drought.
Yeah, we don't think of it. We think about it in the summer when it's hot and we knew it wasn't raining and our lawns were burned out. We're probably, like so many of us, haven't really thought about the fact, but I understand we're still quite a number of inches, depending upon where you are, below what we would have had for the year.
Exactly. I think right here we're somewhere between 6 and 8 inches short for the year. We were fortunate out of the Hurricane Isaac to get about 5.5 inches right here in central Illinois, but in Iowa and north and west, they did not get any of that precipitation at all, so they're somewhere between 12 and 15 inches short for the year.
Which is obviously a lot, and thus why the Corps is holding back some of that water up on the Missouri River.
And that's understandable, and normally you don't really rebuild any of your reservoirs during the winter months because it usually is cold, and you know it takes 7 inches of snow to equal 1 inch of rain, and I don't think we want 200 inches of snow this winter, but that's what it would take to replenish all this.
All right, well, Gary Niemeyer, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about this issue, and we'll follow the results and see what happens.
Thank you very much. And again, we thank all of our elected officials for stepping up to the plate when they needed to.
All right, thank you.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.